sound of an owl that lives right here. Maybe it's a sound you've heard. But if you woke up in the middle of the night and outside your bedroom window you heard that, whoo, 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 what kind of an owl is it? Who said great horn?
Great horned owl right
Great
there.
horned owl.
Gold star for you. Well, welcome to spring. It's supposed to turn to summer next week, but we're here with 6 birds for you to meet. 5 of them are owls. One of them's a mystery bird. We'll see if you can identify her when she comes out. My name's Mark Wilson. I'm here with Marcia Wilson, and we're going to have a hooting good time despite the mist and the rain. And I'm wondering, how many of you have seen or heard an owl in the wild? Well, a lot of you, okay. Well, owls are most active at night, and they're hard to see at night. So you might hear them hooting in your neighborhood or calling, and we're going to have a hooting lesson. We're going to teach you the calls so you can identify the owl without even seeing it, which is pretty cool. And Marcia and I have been doing these programs for 30 years, and in fact, little known message here is that Marcia was raised by owls. She grew up with owls in the house. Her mother and father did wildlife rehab, and they had a great horned owl that taught Marcia how to hoot, and he lived to be how old?
43 and a half years old.
So these owls can live a long time. The bigger the owl, the longer they can live. Now Marcia's going to be handling them, and they won't be flying around the field here. So they're going to be attached to her belt there's a carabiner on her belt, and each owl has leather straps around its legs that are attached to a leash, which attaches to the carabiner on her belt. So they'll be on her gloved hand. Marcia's not going to handle them with bare hands. Why not? Talons, yeah, sharp claws called talons. And what kind of gloves are those?
Well, the gloves that are shaped like this are called gauntlets. And this is what we use to handle birds of prey. And owls are raptors, of course.
So they catch their food with their feet.
Right.
How many of you eat your food with your feet? Any kids use your feet to eat your food? You do? Can I come over for supper and watch? Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting. But they catch their food with their feet, and then they use their beak to finally kill it. And then they'll rip it apart and eat it with their beak. Do owls have teeth? No. What do they have instead? A beak. What's interesting, though, is their breathing holes, their nostrils are in their beak. So when you think about it, it's almost like they're eating through their nose. How many of you would like to eat through your nose? No, that's kind of weird, too. So owls are different than us, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
The owls that we bring to these programs are not releasable. They all have a disability of some kind. We get some of them from wildlife rehabilitators, like New England Wildlife Center in Weymouth. As a matter of fact, one of the birds that we brought here today came from New England Wildlife Center. And so the only way we can have these birds is with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service license from the federal government and different state licenses. And that way, we could bring them to these programs, and you all get to see them up close.
But there are a few rules we kind of have to follow. We can't let you touch the owls. We'll get you nice and close, and pictures are certainly welcome, but you can't actually touch them for your protection and protection of the bird. And they will poop. We call it whitewash, because we're a high-class operation. And they will fertilize the lawn here. And the second thing they might do, if we're really lucky, is they might cough up something. What do you think that's called? A pellet. Some of you have probably taken apart owl pellets,
Anybody?
either at school or camp.
Yeah, look at all the hands.
Yeah.
Great.
And if we're really lucky today, we'll see an owl start to yawn and get ready to cough up a pellet right in front of you. Doesn't happen that often, but I'm feeling kind of lucky today, like it might happen. So the first 2 owls that are going to come out are native to all of New England, all of central and southern New England, and they're called eastern screech owls. And you have them right here in Brockton, and they're hard to see during the day because they're usually hiding down in holes and trees. We brought both colors. Screech owls come in gray and red, and we brought both colors today. And these are not babies. These are full grown. In fact, the gray one here is 2 years old, and the red one is just over 1 year old. But they're full grown. Now, screech owls don't have the best name, because guess what screech owls hardly ever do? Screech. Yeah, whoever named them couldn't have named them after a worse thing, because I've never heard one screech. But instead, what do they sound like, Marcia?
Well, one of the calls that they make is kind of a whinnying sound. They go, let's all try that.
Nice,
Good.
nice.
They also make a trilling sound. I'm not very good at trilling. Can you trill, Mark?
Not really, no.
Okay. So he's going to go on a website called allaboutbirds.org, and you can look up any North American bird, see what it looks like, see where they're found, hear what they sound like. And so he's going to call up screech owl.
So on this website, they have this great recording of a screech owl doing both the whinny and the trill. So it starts off with 2 whinnies, and then a trill, and then 3 more whinnies and another trill. So let's listen. Here we go. That's the trill. One more whinny. And here comes the final trill. Let me hear you trill. Go ahead. You're among friends. Don't be shy. That was pretty weak. Try one more time. There's a giant screech owl in the park. Did you hear that? Because, you know, that recording, when you hear a screech owl, that bird's not very far from you. It's less than 100 feet away. They don't have a really loud call. And a lot of times they live right in neighborhoods. They don't need to live in the wilderness. Anywhere there's big trees with holes in them, that's where you can find screech owls. Now, these little owls came to us last summer from Tennessee. We drove down to Tennessee and picked them up from a wildlife clinic. And both of these owls, believe it or not, were found tangled up in fishing line. And the gray one was found so tangled up that the fishing line abraded her right eye, and she is blind in her right eye. And so, since she can only see out of one eye, it's not a great idea to release her back to the wild, because on the right side of her face, she wouldn't be able to see predators coming in, like bigger owls or hawks, and she'd have less success hunting, not seeing on the right side of her face. So we made the decision with the rehabber that she would not be released back to the wild because of that disability in the right eye. The red one was found hanging upside down, totally entangled, and a little girl named Nora and her father were out fishing in Tennessee, and Nora, the girl, noticed the owl all tangled up. So she and her dad rescued the owl, brought it to the rehab center, and they realized that there was some internal damage in the body. So that's why this bird cannot be released. We think that the red one is a male, and with the gray one is a female. And the way you can tell the difference, the gray one is much bigger than the red one. Females are bigger in owls, hawks, eagles, falcons. Females are always bigger, heavier, stronger than the males. So when they come around, notice the size difference. The red one's quite little. The gray one is bigger than the red one. So we think the gray one is a female, the red one is a male, most likely. Normally, we don't name our birds, but we made an exception for the red screech owl. We named him Nora after the little girl that found him. So even though he's a male, we'll still call him Nora. That's okay. You know, that name could go both ways.
Well,
So
the gray one's trying to kill my glove here.
good thing you got a glove on.
Right.
How much do you think a screech owl weighs? Any guesses? What do you think? 2 pounds? That's a little heavy. I heard someone over here say a quarter pound.
Who said quarter?
Gold star for you. Yeah, they're about 3 or 4 ounces. Now, they don't weigh much because obviously they're covered with what? Feathers. And they don't weigh much because their bones, what do you think? They're hollow or solid? Hollow bones, yeah, yeah. Now, during the day, screech owls are hard to see because they're hiding in holes and trees. And they have to hide because they're on the menu for bigger predators like hawks and big owls. And they know that. So they hide during the day out of sight. Once in a while, during the winter, if you see a cavity that's facing the sun, a screech owl might pop up and sunbathe like for an hour or two in the middle of the winter. But normally they're hiding out of sight. You can't see them. Now, one of the ways you can attract screech owls to your yard or neighborhood is to put up a house for them like this. This is especially made for screech owls. It's got a 3.5-inch hole, and there is a housing shortage for screech owls. There's a lot of competition for cavities, and you know, house prices here in New England have gone crazy. A one-bedroom birdhouse like this with no bathroom in Brockton now sells for $200,000, and you can build one for $15, a scrap pine. So put one of these up about 10 feet high in a tree, face it to the south. You don't want it to the north where the nasty weather comes from. And you may get them sleeping in here in the winter, called roosting. Or in the spring, if you hit the lottery, they'll nest and lay eggs and have babies peeking out. And how cool would that be? Now the other thing is squirrels might use this. And squirrels will fill it full of leaves, and then the screech owls can't move in. So you might want to put up two, one for the squirrels, one for the screech owls. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comments as we're moving along?
Has anybody here seen a screech owl in Brockton or other towns? You've seen one? In Plymouth? In a cavity in a tree? On a branch? Well, this is at night? Okay, because at night they're often out of the cavity, but during the day they're usually in the hole.
And we had a question here?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's over the time that you've had these, they become more acclimated to you, and they're sort of...
The question he's wondering is, over time, do these birds become more acclimated to us handling them and to having them? And yes, they get to know us, we get to know them. Marcia handles them a lot. It's usually she that handles them, not me usually. That way there's consistency and they get used to it. But I can handle them too. And when we get a new bird in, it takes a while for them to get used to it. Yeah, they don't immediately just automatically let us handle them like this. So it takes a lot of work.
Right, and so we take little steps, and I have to earn their trust. And as long as the same person holds them all the time, then I like to think that they feel secure.
Yeah. Now, screech owls eat a lot of interesting things. Not only do they eat mice, but they eat a lot of insects. They love moths. They eat beetles. They could take, on the non-insect menu, they can take earthworms. They can take, even small fish on occasion.
Crickets.
Crickets, yeah, beetles, moths. So they eat a lot. Their diet is quite varied. It's not just mice. Katydids. Yeah, some of you might be hearing katydids this summer in the trees in your neighborhood. That's a green insect called a katydid. They're up in the crown of the tree, and they make a racket all through August and into September. And screech owls just love katydids. Yeah.
So I'm sure some of you are noticing that they can look straight over their backs if they want to.
Like the gray one?
Yeah.
How far can you turn your head without moving your shoulders? That's assuming the arthritis isn't kicking in now. You can do about half a circle, right? You can go 90 degrees one way, 90 degrees the other way for a total of 180. An owl can do this. Pretend I'm an owl. An owl can spin its head 220 degrees back to the front, and then 220 in the other direction. And this has turned into a math question now. What's 220 plus 220? 440. How many degrees in a circle?
180.
360. So it's more than a circle if you count both directions. But did you notice that the owl can't do something with its eyes that you're doing with your eyes right now? What can they not do with their eyes? Say it again. They can't move their eyes. Exactly right. Their eyes are fixed in their head. Yeah, they have to turn their whole head to look left or right. Unlike us, we can just shift our eyes, like, be kind of sneaky about it. But they can't do that. Yeah. So that's how they can, see over their back. They can, spin their head. The way they can turn their head so far is they have extra neck bones. You and I have 7. They have 14. And those extra bones give them extra joints for extra movement.
Now, you're probably looking at those little things sticking up off the top of their head. We might be tempted to call them ears or ear tufts or horns, but are they really ears? No. Point to us on your own heads and show us where the ear holes are.
Their ears are right next to their eyes. Can't see them. They're hidden under the feathers, but they're right here next to the eye. In fact, if I lifted up the face feathers of a screech owl and looked into its ear opening, you know what I would see? The back of the eye socket. If I looked into your ear, would I see the back of your eye socket? Hopefully not. If I did, that'd be kind of troubling. Yeah. No, so your ears are much farther back in your head than an owl's ears. Their ears point in the same direction as their eyes.
Maybe they'd like to hear like an owl.
You want to hear like an owl? Oh, it's easy. Hold your hands up. Palms towards me. Cup your hands. And then put them behind each ear. They'll show me your palms when you do it. Don't cover your ears. I want to see your palms. And now turn your head to the left. Turn your head to the right. You have great directional hearing now. And that means for lunch you're going to have mice. Because that's what you can catch doing that. You can hear them. So they have exceptionally good hearing. They have good eyesight too, but they gave up some color perception. They don't see color as well as we do. But at night they can see detail that you and I would have trouble seeing or would not see it at all. So they can hunt on hearing alone or an eyesight alone or a combination of the two. And they can catch food in near total darkness just using their hearing.
And of course, they don't live in these carrying boxes. This is just how they go out to programs.
Yep.
And when we get them back in a few hours, we'll walk them back down to their big outdoor enclosures.
And how long do you think they can live, Marcia?
Well, the screech owls in captivity sometimes can live into their teens or 20s.
So how does that work? Do big owls live longer or less than little owls?
Big owls can live longer. And after all, they're at the top end of the food chain.
Oh.
They're apex predators. And generally speaking, they don't have as many enemies.
Yeah. Wait till you hear how long this big owl can live. I won't spoil the surprise until she comes out, but she could live a long, long time. All right, well, we're going to go up in owl size, and Marcia's going to go up in gauntlet size. I think she's putting on a bigger glove.
Yep.
Ooh,
bigger glove.
That's a granddaddy of a glove, or a grandmother of a glove. Tell us about that glove. That looks pretty big.
This is triple alkyd, and yeah, it's thick because, after all, they have very sharp talons.
You know how some people collect shoes? Marcia collects gauntlets. She has a collection of gauntlets. She brought her best Sunday go-to-meeting gauntlet today. All right, so this owl is quite a bit bigger than a screech owl. And this is an owl that could show up in Brockton. Did she just poop? Yep, she did. Whitewash.
So this is a barred owl. And barred owls get their name from the bars, the pattern on the upper chest. These are stripes down here. And right now I've got my finger in her left ear, right there.
So barred owls are noisy. If they're in the neighborhood, you're going to hear them, even sometimes during the day. On a cloudy day like this, they might be hooting. And at night, too. They have an ain't no call, yeah.
Ain't no call that goes, ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh.
You just heard one the other night. Where? In Brockton? Bridgewater,
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, did you call back to it? At 3 a.m.? Well, that's no problem. You can still call back to it.
That's their time of night.
We don't care what the neighbors think, you know.
And when I was growing up here in the South Shore, my parents were bird watchers, and my mom said, if you really want to remember a barred owl's call, just memorize, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Ooh, 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 ooh. So in a crazy kind of way, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Matches the notes. Ooh, 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 ooh. Give it a try.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, and sometimes they skip the first 6 notes and they just do the you-all part. Who-all. Go ahead. Who-all. Okay.
We got a field full of hooters here.
They're
I got to be careful with that word, though. A certain restaurant chain ruined its use. But yeah, that was a good job. Now, this barred owl came to us from New Hampshire, and you might notice the right wing is drooping. This bird was hit by a car on a highway in New Hampshire, and someone found it on the shoulder of the road with a badly broken wing, and they brought it to a wildlife rehabber in Henniker, New Hampshire, and she worked with that bird and tried to get that wing to heal, but it didn't work out too well. This bird not only had broken bones in the wing, but muscle damage and tendon damage, ligament damage, and that wing is not usable, so this bird cannot fly. That's a permanent injury. So, in her outdoor cage, we give her a ramp, a handicap ramp. She uses it to climb up and sit up high off the ground. And, you know, she lived alone for a couple years. And then we adopted another barred owl from New Hampshire, a male. And he too had been hit by a car. And he too had a broken wing that didn't heal properly. And it was on his left side. And so he was in another cage from her. And at night they would talk to each other. She'd hoot to him, he'd hoot back. And this went on for like 3 months. And finally, we got the idea that maybe they would get along. So we introduced him into her cage and watched him very carefully, because you never know if a blind date's going to go well. And guess what happened? It turned into a love story. She has a new boyfriend. And they sit together good wing to good wing. And they hoot to the wild owls at night. I don't think they came in last night, but 2 nights ago, our backyard was a hootenanny. There were at least 4 different barred owls hooting all at once. Both she and her boyfriend, and then 2 wild owls that came in as well. And we don't know either of their ages. They're adults. They're at least 5 years old, but they could be 10, 15, or even 20. There's no way to age them now when they're an adult. And they can live a long time. Now, Marcia, show us how deep those feathers are.
Well, look at how deep they are on her head, and her body underneath there isn't much bigger around than my arm. And so how much do you think she weighs?
Any guesses? What do you think? Say it again. 10 pounds? 10 pounds is a reasonable guess, but it is quite a bit too much. So what's less than 10? A pound? Her boyfriend weighs 1 pound, actually 1.25 pounds. So is she going to weigh more or less? More. So what do you think? You got it, 2 pounds. So that's a big weight difference when you actually do it by percentage. And the reason the females are bigger is they're the ones that lay the eggs, and that takes a lot of energy to create the eggs. And then they have to incubate them, and then they have to defend the nest against raccoons that might climb up and try to eat them. And it pays for her to be big, strong, and heavier than the male. So this barred owl in the wild would eat a variety of things, including salamanders, frogs, smaller owls, mice, voles, rats, chipmunks. Barred owls are the gardener's best friend because they eat chipmunks. You know, all those little rodents that like to gnaw on your expensive bulbs and the roots of all your expensive perennial plants that you just put in. Mm-hmm. Well, the barred owl can be your best friend if you're a gardener. And they also take some bigger prey like flying squirrels or maybe even a red squirrel. But, you know, barred owls and other owls are having a hard time right now because a lot of people are using mouse and rat poison. If you have a mouse or a rat in the house, the best way to help an owl is to not use poison. So here's what we would recommend. If you have a mouse or a rat in the house, and sooner or later we all do, and you never have just one, right? You have more than one. If there's one there, there's a whole family of them. Try to use a snap trap rather than poison. These things are cheap. I like to bait ours with peanut butter, and it's very effective. Cheese doesn't work so good because they can steal the bait, unless it's Cheese Whiz, and you can squirt it right on there. And this is how you can trap mice, and they die right away. Glue traps aren't too humane because the mouse sticks to it, and then it's not dead. And then what do you do with it, right? It becomes another problem. So the snap traps work very effectively. And there's a big problem across America with rodenticides. You might have heard about just over a year ago in Arlington, Mass. There was a bald eagle pair nesting in the cemetery in the center of town. The female came down in January, I think it was January of 23, and she found a rat that was acting kind of sluggish. She caught it, she ate it. The next day that eagle died. She was poisoned by that rat. And just this past spring, a family of great horned owls in Gloucester, the whole family was wiped out because they were eating poison rodents. They lost 3 babies and 2 adults. So it's really sad. But you can, this isn't a downer here. You can make a difference by not using rodenticides. And a lot of towns, did we bring the sign, Marcia?
Yep.
Oh, a lot of towns are putting through home rule petitions that are outlawing rodenticide use in public buildings, like schools, town offices, DPWs, places like that. And this is a sign from Lexington that is trying to outlaw the use of rodenticides in public buildings. Arlington already did it. Other towns are coming around. And, urban towns are particularly important to get on board because a lot of rodents come around dumpsters in urban areas, and that's where they're getting their food. In New York, it's a huge issue. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we bring out this owl who ties into New York in a certain special way.
Yeah, and sometimes pets inadvertently get poisoned.
Not to mention raccoons, skunks, opossums, other predators, foxes, coyotes, they can all die from, ingesting rodenticide. So it's more work to use a trap, but you're benefiting wildlife by not using poison.
Well, we did bring another raptor. It's not an owl, but it is a bird of prey. And I would bring her out, but she doesn't like me anymore. And Mark is going to bring her out, and we'll tell you the rest of the story. And you'll notice that. What's that? No babies with a boyfriend or girlfriend, right?
I think the wing injuries prevent that from happening. Yeah, not to put too fine a point on it. So, obviously not an owl. Owls have big heads. Does this bird have a big head? No. Owls have eyes on the front of their head. Does this have eyes on the front, this bird? No. And raise your hand if you have a guess who it might be. What do you think? Peregrine falcon, you're in the right ballpark. It is a falcon, but it's not a peregrine. Do you know what the smallest falcon would be in Massachusetts? Anybody call it out if you know.
Kestrel.
American kestrel. Yeah, so you're in the right area. You're like on second base, but the home run is American kestrel. And peregrines are 2 to 3 times bigger than this bird. Peregrines are the fastest animal on Earth. They've been clocked at 220 miles an hour in a dive. This kestrel isn't such a fast flyer as that, but she can hover when she's hunting. She flaps her wings and goes nowhere, hangs in the air over a field. She's not a woodland bird. And when she sees a mouse or a cricket or a grasshopper or a dragonfly, she'll drop down out of the hover and pounce on it with her feet and then carry it off and eat it up on a perch in a tree. Now, we can tell it's a falcon because if you look at her wings, are they rounded or pointed on the ends? Pointed. So that tells us this is a fast-flying bird. All birds with pointed wings are fast flyers, including swallows, chimney swifts, falcons, terns, and other birds have pointed wings. And this is a female. You can tell because, see the rusty brown on her wings? If this was a male, the wings would be blue-gray. So the males and females look different, and that's different than owls. Owls, males and females look identical usually, but not with other falcons. Usually you can tell the males from the females based on coloring and weight. And she was taken out of the nest when she was a baby. Someone took her out of the nest and kept her as a pet. And that was illegal, what they did. And they kept her for about a month. And so she didn't get raised by her real parents, she got raised by humans. And then after about a month, they either got tired of taking care of her, or perhaps they realized what they're doing was wrong against the law. So they put her in a cardboard box, and they dropped her off secretly at a wildlife clinic. And when the doctor opened the box, guess what happened? Out popped the kestrel, she landed on the doctor's head and pooped. And this kestrel is checking out your heads. She likes heads. That's not normal behavior for a wild bird. In fact, she would like to sit on one of your heads, but we're not going to let that happen today. But if she really likes your head, she'll look at you and then go and bob her head like that. So you can tell she's checking out this crowd. And I got to say, this crowd does have a lot of good-looking heads.
Does she sit on your head?
She does, but I wear a hat. Because the first time she sat in my head, she pooped on it, just like she did on the doctor. And it ran down my neck like a raw egg. Not to put too fine a detail on it, but yeah. So she's 8 years old, and she's totally imprinted. She's chosen me as her mate, in fact, which is kind of awkward, because she wants to start a family, and I really can't help her there, because I'm a different species. So she's been courting me for the last 2 weeks. At night, she really gets, adamant about it. It's like, come on, get in here and nest with me. It's like, I really can't. I'm not human. I'm not a kestrel. So.
Yeah, and when we first adopted her, I handled her a lot. She'd sit on my head, but then she matured during that first summer, and she started diving at my face. So
Yeah.
Things changed.
So she's about 5 ounces, and you can see she's very comfortable in my hand. I don't have to even wear a glove. She's not digging in with those talons. How many people here have seen a kestrel in the wild? Oh, nice. A few hands. I'm glad to hear it, because they're declining. Their numbers are going down. They will use a birdhouse, just like the screech owl box, and you can put one up on a field to attract kestrels. But they're in trouble. Insecticides are killing some of their food. Habitat destruction in development is a problem. And then Cooper's hawks can prey on them. And Cooper's hawks are getting more abundant. They're not declining. They're increasing. And notice she's looking at the sky. She's checking out that osprey going over. That's a hawk that eats fish right there, so she doesn't have to worry. Yep. Nice osprey just flew over the park there. Sometimes they'll dive into this pond and come up with a bass or a pickerel. And ospreys have really increased since DDT was banned. So it's a success story. Ospreys are doing well, as are bald eagles and peregrine falcons. All right. Now, if you see a little raptor in the top of a tree, and the raptor's bobbing its tail like this, it's a kestrel. And it looks like she's waving at you, right? When she does that, I can roll my hand and get her to do it. She's not all tangled up here. Let me see. All right. But anyway, she'll bob that tail when she's not flapping. Kind of like this. She's not cooperating right now. Of course, it's when the TV camera's on, right? Yeah. Anyway, she does bob the tail. It's a good field mark to identify them without binoculars. And I'm going to tuck her back. She was having breakfast.
She was?
Well, actually, I didn't give her breakfast yet. You want to see what's for breakfast? It's a mouse. You want to see it? It's a free-range vegan mouse, farm-raised. It's very high quality. We buy them frozen. They get shipped to us frozen from the farm. And that's going to be a nice, actually it's lunch now for her. And she'll probably eat the head first. They always do. And then they eat the body, including the tail.
So kestrels are not a nocturnal hunter. They come out during the daytime. Does anybody know what the word for daytime active is?
Opposite of nocturnal?
Diurnal. Diurnal. So the kestrel is a diurnal raptor.
All right. So we're going to go up in owl size yet again. This next owl is the great horned owl. And he is only just over a year old.
No.
Oh, that's the other one. I'm
We don't
sorry.
know.
We don't know this one's age. I was thinking, we have 3 different great horned owls. I had to stop and think which one we brought. This one we don't know the age on. He came in as an adult. And he has a poignant story.
And he might flap a few times. He has trouble keeping his balance.
So please don't scream if he flaps.
He can't get away.
He won't land in your lap. He's bigger though, yeah. Now, yeah, you'll see. I can get the door, Marcia. You'll see this great horned owl. His wing is drooping, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yes.
Marcia, what's the sound of this owl?
It's his right wing. It's 4 notes. It goes. Try that.
Nice.
And then maybe back in the woods you might hear a higher one. Go ahead.
Excellent.
And maybe the lower one would answer back. Go ahead.
Really well done.
Yeah.
You're great. Nice job. Give yourselves a wing flap. That was so good. All right. So, great horned owls are pretty common in Massachusetts. In fact, they're found in every state except Hawaii. And this one was found in southeastern Mass on the ground in bad shape. He not only had a broken wing, but it turns out he had a lot more going on than that. So, initially, we think he was hunting, crossed a road, didn't look both ways for traffic, like owls don't do that, and a car hit him. Broke his right wing, and they didn't stop because obviously he's still in the wild and he's on foot now in a neighborhood hunting because he can't fly. And he sees either a mouse or a rat that's acting kind of sluggish. So he goes over, catches it with his feet, and then eats it. And what the owl didn't know was that rodent had been poisoned. So not only does he have a broken wing now, he's got poison in his system. So someone found him in pretty rough shape. And when they brought him to the New England Wildlife Center in Weymouth, they did a blood test, and they found out a lot of rodenticide in his blood. So what they did is they gave him something called vitamin K, which is actually also called clotting agent or clotting factor. And it worked. It got him to stop bleeding internally, because mouse poison, rat poison causes animals to bleed inside. That's what kills them. But they gave him vitamin K and it stopped the bleeding. And they tried to fix the wing though, and that didn't work out so well. He can't fly. He's non-flighted. And he makes a great educational bird though, because we can talk about rodenticides and the dangers of them. But he's been through a tough life. So we're happy to have him. He's a good ambassador. And he gets 2 or 3 large mice a night. He's got a great appetite. He knows what starvation is. And he's a survivor.
And he's very lucky that he got rescued.
Yeah. So you'll notice he has big yellow eyes and big ear tufts on his head. We think those ear tufts are good for camouflage and maybe mood expression. And great horned owls take down some big prey.
Yeah, look at the size of their feet.
Yeah, they can take skunks, they can take big rats, they can take squirrels, big snakes, occasionally even a small cat or dog. In fact, a friend of ours years ago was photographing, I think it was in either Canton or Milton. He was near the Blue Hills photographing at a great horned owl's nest. This is in the days of film. He didn't have a digital camera back then. And at night, he saw the male owl fly in with carrying prey to the nest. And he took a picture, a flash went off. He sent his film out for processing. And when he got the film back, guess what the owl had carried in? A poodle. A toy poodle. And I think it still had the rhinestone collar on, if I'm not mistaken. So they will take some large prey. So you already know coyotes are one of the major predators of pets. So be aware that your small dog or cat is on the menu for more than just coyotes. Great horned owls, foxes, fishers, they can all take pets. So it's a dangerous world out there for pets. But the great horned owl, this is a male, and a female would even be bigger. He weighs in at about, what, 3 pounds, Marcia?
Yep, about 3.5.
And some of you might remember Spooky, the great horned owl at the Boston Museum of Science. Well, Spooky lived to be how old, Marcia?
38.
And Spooky was famous. He was a rock star. They'd bring him out and present him to all the museum goers, and they usually didn't have a leash on him. He was just sitting on the trainer's hand. And one day they bring Spooky out, and Spooky's looking over the audience like the owls do, and he spots this proper Bostonian woman with this beautiful mink hat. And he's liking what he sees. And he jumps off the hand, beelines for her head, snatches the hat off of her head, and flies into the museum and kills it. And I would have paid big money to have seen that. The look on her face must have been incredible. And he flew out to the museum and killed the hat, and I think from then on they probably attached Spooky to the handler, like this one's attached to Marcia. But did anybody ever see Spooky? Did you ever meet Spooky? Yeah. Yeah, he was a legendary. He did a pellet in front of you? Oh, how cool is that? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody hearing great horned owls in the wild around where you live? Yeah? Okay. Are you in Brockton? Whitman? And where were you hearing one?
Halifax?
Halifax, yeah. And where were you hearing one? On the top of a pine tree? Yeah. All right. And how old are you? You're 4? You're going to be 5. Yeah, I know. That comes after 4. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
We're going to move this. This is a perch for the last bird.
Where do you want it? Up from under the tent?
Yeah.
Okay. So, needless to say, this is going to be a big owl. And this is not a native owl to the United States. This is an owl you would expect to see in Europe and Asia. It's called a Eurasian eagle owl. And Marcia is going to handle this bird. She's quite heavy. The eagle owl we're bringing out is a female, and she weighs 10 pounds. And you'll notice her eye color is a lot different than a great horned owl. So I want you to notice the eye color. And you'll notice that she stares at you. Now, I like to say she doesn't stare at you, she stares through you. You'll see what I mean. And I think, in fact, when she's staring at you, she can see your soul. But I can't prove that. But she has a really amazing stare. Not to mention a huge presence. So she's probably sitting in there behind her perch. Marcia has to get her up onto the glove.
She's hissing at me.
Like all big owls do. And this eagle owl is 15 years old. Captive hatched here in the United States at a zoo. And you'll see right away, she is massive. She's tied to be the largest type of owl in the world, based on weight. And, you know, she kind of sets the pace of the program here at this point. Here she comes.
She has about a 5-foot wingspread. And she does have what we call ear tufts. Of course, they're not ears. And they're not horns. Would you mind matching her
Yeah,
door,
it
please?
just swung open again.
Yeah. Otherwise, she'll try to fly back in there. But the Eurasian eagle owl, again, they're found in Europe and Asia, not around here, but they are a cousin of the great horned owl. And they are about the only owl that actually says who. They go, whoo. Go ahead. Whoo. Yeah.
So there is an owl that says who. This is it. And eagle owls, the weight difference between male and female is really big. As I mentioned, she weighs 10 pounds. We have a male at home, and he only weighs 4.5 pounds. So big size difference. And in the wild, they can take down bigger prey. Look at the size of her feet. They're massive. Her claws are like bear claws. And she could take down a European badger, a European hare, which would be an 8 or 10 pound rabbit, essentially. Could take down a hedgehog, which isn't too heavy, but they're covered with spines. And big snakes, small dog, small cat, like a fox pup, easily could take one of those. She gets a big rat every night, 150-gram rat for supper.
She's watching the osprey.
Yeah. Is the osprey in flight?
Yeah, it's a ways away.
Okay. Yeah, owls are very aware of the sky. They always look to the sky to see what predators are around. And they're a lot of times we'll follow the gaze of the owl, and they'll be staring at a bald eagle overhead, or a red-tailed hawk, or in this case, an osprey. And so owls are great bird watchers. They really notice things that are flying.
And she has never lived in the wild. She hatched in captivity. And so that is instinct. If she keys in on another bird of prey, that's just wired into her.
Yeah. So this eagle owl, we would hope would live into her 50s or maybe even 60s. the world's record for eagle owl age is 61 years old at a zoo in Germany. So the rule of thumb is bigger owls live longer than small owls, potentially. It's kind of the opposite of dogs. You know, usually small dogs live longer than big dogs, but it's the opposite with owls. And one year, about 5 years ago, she laid an egg in her cage, and I went in to collect the egg. It wasn't fertile, so it wasn't going to hatch. And when I turned my back to her, she flew at me and hit me in the side of the face with those big talons and opened up my cheek, and I was bleeding. And so I beat a hasty retreat out of the cage. I says, well, maybe we'll let her sit on that egg for a while. And she sat on it for 40 days. And at that point, the egg started to rot and stink. And it was attracting flies. I go, oh, I got to go in and get that egg. So I put on 3 winter coats and a motorcycle helmet. And I waded in, expecting the worst. And she looked at me and kind of gave me a shrug and went, eh. She was done with the egg. She didn't care. I collected it, put it out in the compost pile, and a raccoon had a nice meal. But yeah, so she has laid an egg once. That was it. That was her only one time that she did. But typically in the wild they have 2 eggs they'll lay.
Now, you might have heard of a Eurasian eagle owl down in New York City that was illegally released from the Central Park Zoo.
Yeah, someone cut the cage back in January of 23, and the owls spent most of the summer in Central Park hunting rats, squirrels, and pigeons.
And it looked just like she does.
And the New York City named the owl Flacco, F-L-A-C-O. And New York City fell in love with it. There were people photographing it every day and posting on Instagram. The owl had its own Facebook page. The owl, I think, had a website. I mean, paparazzi were following the owl. I mean, it was a celebrity. And then at the end of the summer, it moved out of the park and started going into different neighborhoods. And people would see it sitting on their fire escape or on their windowsill or up on the roof of their building or in a tree in the street. And New York went crazy for this owl. And then about 3 months ago, they found Flacco dead on the sidewalk. And at first they said, officially they said, oh, it hit a building. It flew into a building. And Marsh and I said, nah, doesn't sound right. That wouldn't be what would happen. But they did a necropsy on Flacco, which is kind of like an autopsy. They, cut the bird open and discover what killed it. And they found 4 different rodenticides in that bird. So what killed it was the poison, but maybe she did hit the building because she was poisoned. She couldn't control her flight well, and she dropped dead after hitting it. But, New York was devastated. And if you go online now and punch in F-L-A-C-O, New York City, you'll see all kinds of pictures of Flacco. Beautiful bird. And I'm amazed that Flacco lived this long, because in New York, rodenticide is everywhere. I mean, there are rats and mice that are poisoned all the time, and I'm amazed the owl survived as long as it did.
And there is now a group of New Yorkers trying to pass a law, they're calling it Flacco's Law, to make it illegal for the city to use a certain type of rodenticide that has been poisoning birds of prey.
And there's a movement. You know how in New York they used to put their garbage and trash out in plastic bags on the curb? Rats can punch into that. It's like a buffet for rats. So now there's a movement to outlaw plastic bags. You have to use a rat-proof, garbage container so the rats can't get into the food. Because that's a major source of, food for rats, is curbside trash. Yeah. Any questions as we're wrapping up here? Yes. How big a space does this bird have to fly where we live? This bird gets a cage that it's a compromise between enough space for her to fly, but not so big that we can't catch her. So it's about 16 feet long and 10 feet wide, 10 by 16.
With a high roof.
And the height, it's about 8-foot high roof. So it's not a huge space, but it's enough for her to get exercise. And she looks nice. She's not breaking feathers, so the cage isn't too small. So the flighted owls get a bigger cage like she does. Some of the non-flighted birds get a little bit smaller cage with ramps because they just don't need the space. They can't fly. But all of our cages meet the minimum requirement by federal standards. They set standards how big the cage has to be, and we exceed the minimum size for the federal standards. The tufts have a function, yes, but we don't necessarily know what it is. We think it might be camouflage, it might be mood expression, or it might be something else altogether. I do have a kind of a theory that I haven't proven, but on some owls, the ear tufts are concave on the back, and I think that some owls use their ear tufts to collect sound from behind them. It hits the concave ear tuft and gets funneled right down to the ear, which is right below the ear tuft. Is right next to the eye, below the ear tuft. So I think this would be a good subject for someone to do a PhD thesis on. You know, they might collect sound from behind them using those ear tufts. It hasn't been proven. We need some like sound engineer to do a study and see. But I'm thinking, it's like with screech owls, that they can hear behind them with those ear tufts. And maybe great horns too, and maybe even an eagle owl. Yeah. Can you pet them? Well, I wouldn't recommend it because that bird bites. Oh, they all bite, yeah.
We're actually not allowed to let anybody to come into contact.
I mean, you came with 10 fingers, right? We don't want you going home minus a finger. Yeah, yeah, they do bite. And you know what I really worry about is not so much the beak, it's the feet. That's where the power lies. They can squeeze stronger than a human. Strong adult that's trained can do about 140 psi. An eagle owl can do 500 psi with its feet. And if you measure the pressure at the edge of the talon, it might even be 1,000 psi. It's really powerful, powerful feet.
And by the way, you don't have to worry about your dog. She's tethered. She loves to see dogs. We don't have any dogs, so when there's a dog at one of our programs, she's right on it.
Yeah.
She's just interested.
Yeah. Who's her predator? She doesn't have a predator. Humans, they might shoot them. But she's an apex predator. She's the top of the food chain. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I was talking to a researcher in Mongolia, and he was studying an eagle owl nest on a cliff in an old eagle's nest. They don't build their own nest. They were using an old eagle's nest. And a quarter mile down the cliff, there was a nest of golden eagles. And at night, the eagle owl parent would fly down to the golden eagle nest and under the cover of darkness grab the babies of the golden eagle, kill them, and bring them back and feed them to his babies. That takes chutzpah. That's like, whoa. You know, the eagles can't see well at night, and the owl had the advantage. But to prey on golden eagles, that means you're the king of the food chain. It really does. Yeah. Yes. In Harwich, yeah.
They were monsters. But they made a shrill sound.
You're getting restless. Come on.
Yeah, those are babies begging for food. And by baby, I don't mean they're small. I just mean they're young. So that's a food begging call. Yeah, what you were hearing was young great horned owls. This is the middle of the summer. Yeah, so they're still with their parents, and that's how they beg for food. They do that shrill.
They were huge.
Yeah, they're big.
When they took off, it was like, wow.
Yeah, they're a big owl. They're not quite as big as these, but when you see them from a distance, it's very hard to judge size. Yeah, but I'm sure they were great horned owls in Harwich. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hope you got some good pictures there. I see a fleet of cameras back there. You're from what camera club? Hockamock Digital. They're looking for members. Does a phone count as a camera? All right. Do you have a category in your contest for phone pictures? All right. That's awesome. Just so you know, I was a photographer at the Globe for 23 years. Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, thanks for coming out on a breezy day.
And Mark, with your help, we could do...
Hi Hi, I'm Rachel Bruce with Wildlands Trust. Today we are out at DW Field Park for Give a Hoot About the Park, our first spring event here. We have Eyes on Owls, the folks that are doing live owl shows. And we also have community groups that interact with the park in various ways and have lots of different interactive activities and ways to get involved with DW Field Park. This event is sponsored and funded by the Massachusetts Municipality Vulnerability Preparedness Program, or MASS MVP. And we hope to be doing this event every year if we continue to get MVP funding. The DW Field Park Initiative is hosting the event, which is a coalition of Wildlands Trust, the organization that I work for, as well as Old Colony Planning Council, the DW Field Park Association, the town of Avon, and the city of Brockton. And we have all come together to do improvements and revitalize DW Field Park. Thank you so much to all the community groups and community members who came out to give a hoot about the park today on Sunday, May 19th, on this fabulous rainy day here at the park. We really appreciate everybody's support. You can find out more about what's happening with the initiative at dwfpi.org or dwfieldparkinitiative.org. Thank you so much for coming out.